So we'll start by setting our motivation. So we reflect that we're using this time to focus our minds on Thursdays on bodhicitta. One of the pieces of advice given by Khandala that will help create the causes and the conditions for Lama Zopa Rinpoche's swift return back into the world. Rinpoche was the embodiment of bodhicitta, so in a way, by familiarizing our mind with it, we draw closer to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's mind. Making that connection and fulfilling his advice. So we reflect on the benefits that we've received through FPMT, through Lama Zopa directly or indirectly. And think of how incredibly beneficial and necessary it is for the world for that kind of extraordinary bodhisattva activity to remain. I think that the purpose of our time is to help to create the causes and the conditions that will allow it to remain. With the briefest possible break, the swiftest possible return. So we think whatever obstacles there may be in my mind, in the minds of any sentient being that create karmic obstacles to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's swift return, may they be completely pacified by engaging in these recommended practices. And then with that motivation, focus on settling the body, adopting a stable, comfortable, upright position. So I think about keeping our feet flat and our back straight, torso open, hands in the lap right over left with the palms upturned and the thumbs gently touching. Our eyes are gently closed or slightly open, being sure to let in enough light to remain alert. I try to avoid slouching or leaning. I also let go of any unnecessary tension in the body, relaxing into a stable, comfortable, upright position. And begin to pull back your awareness from attending to the environment, allowing sights and sounds to be as they are without investigation, constraining your awareness just of the body and mind. Concentrating that awareness in the present by attending closely to the physical sensation of the air moving into and back out of the tip of the nostrils. Noticing quickly when anything other than that one physical sensation is arising in the mind, and without judgment or frustration, lifting your awareness up from those distractions and placing it gently but firmly again and again on the breath. And briefly reassert your motivation. And the first meditation is Lama Zopa Rinpoche's Mahayana equilibrium meditation. So the very first meditation that we did in this series was on sort of the more standard equanimity meditation. Rinpoche created this meditation with an additional number of techniques for overcoming anger and developing patience, which are some of the empowering conditions that perpetuate categorizing people into friend, enemy, and stranger. So it's a slightly more elaborate meditation. So he instructs that we begin by thinking it is never enough to gain only liberation for myself. Attachment to personal peace and striving solely for this is both selfish and cruel. So that's a strong statement, but we can reflect on the teachings on the suffering of samsara. And think that if we deeply understand the incredible and ultimately pointless suffering occurring in the hell realm, the animal realm, hungry ghost realm, and even the complete waste of merit that happens in the upper realm, in God and demigod realms. And we can think that abandoning sentient beings to that suffering could be considered cruel if we have conviction that it's possible to overcome, which is clearly taught in the Lamrim. So then we visualize that we're surrounded by all sentient beings. Our mother on our left, our mother in this life on our left, our father in this life in our right, on our right. Lama Zopa says in front of you, visualize someone that you dislike, someone that you think is acting against your wishes, against your interests. And behind you, place your dearest friend. To the side, visualize a stranger, someone who arouses only neutral feelings. So we'll take a moment to stabilize that visualization. And then Lama Zopa says we ought to think there is no reason at all for me to be attached to and help my friend or to hate and harm my enemy. He says if I were to strive for only my own happiness and peace, there would be no reason for me to have been born human. Even as an animal, I could strive for this. The various animals have the same aim, he says, as many highly educated people, happiness of the self alone, and also create many negative actions, such as fighting and destroying enemies, cheating others and so forth, all in the pursuit of their own happiness. The only difference between such animals and humans is their shape. So I'm trying to pause here and reflect on whether that seems true in one's experience. Lama Zopa says, the main purpose of my having been human is to strive for and achieve higher aims, to bring every sentient being to everlasting happiness. This is something no animal can ever do. Just as I wish to avoid suffering and find happiness, so too do all other sentient beings. Therefore, all other sentient beings and I are equal. There's no logical reason for me to care more about myself than others, or to harm enemies or any other sentient being. So we'll pause here again. And reflecting on the meaning of a perfect human rebirth, its value going far beyond comfort. Its opportunity to achieve enlightenment. And the purpose of that enlightenment to be able to secure the happiness and well-being of every sentient being, recognizing that no sentient being has any greater claim to achieving enlightenment than any other. And that claim is also the birthright of every sentient being. Simply by existing, by having the status of a suffering sentient being, are they deserving of enlightenment. Lama Zopa says, for countless rebirths with the self-cherishing mind, I have been discriminating other beings as friend, enemy, or stranger. He quotes Chandrakirti, who writes, where there is the self-cherishing mind, there is the discrimination of other. Lama Zopa writes, when partiality discriminates between self and other, attachment and hatred arise. When partiality discriminates between self and other, attachment and hatred arise. He writes, all misfortune arises from acting under the influence of these negative minds. The self-cherishing mind causes attachment to self, which produces attachment to my own happiness. The entire range of negative minds arises from that. So pause here and reflect on the operation of the self-cherishing mind in our lives, the mind, the perspective that places our interests, our desires, our goals above those of any other, or even collectively all others. Trying to observe its shortcomings, gain clarity, of it as an obstacle on the path. By seeing its faults in our own direct experience. Lama Zopa writes, anger is caused by greed and self-cherishing. It makes me discriminate against whoever disturbs my happiness, hindering me in some way. This produces the enemy. In the same way, attachment creates the friend, someone who helps me. Ignorance labels those who neither help nor hinder as strangers. He writes, anger makes me hate and harm the enemy. Attachment makes me cling to and help the friend, and ignorance makes me see the stranger as having a permanent self-nature. By acting under the influence of these negative minds, I lead myself into difficult and suffering situations. They create danger and suffering for myself and others and bring no peace. They create danger and suffering for myself and others and bring no peace. So here we'll pause and reflect on the operation of anger and attachment. In our own lives. The difficulties that arise in relationships, mental suffering. It arises in our own minds. The difficulty that we have in truly wishing to work for the benefit of those that we label as enemies or even strangers, and how that's an obstacle on the path. Again, trying to gain clarity that these are states of mind that are not suitable for one seeking enlightenment. Lama Zopa writes, Since beginningless time, the two negative actions of helping out of attachment and harming out of anger have thrown me into samsaric suffering, making it impossible for me to achieve the perfect peace of liberation and enlightenment. Negative actions leave negative imprints on the consciousness. These ripen into endless experiences of suffering. If I continue to behave in this way, I will experience the same suffering over and over for eons, and I will receive neither realizations nor enlightenment itself. So here we try to develop a weariness with these habits persisting in our mental continuum, developing the courage to overcome them, seeing that their faults persist beyond even this life. Under the influence of these mental states, we will continue to cycle, never free of the sufferings of samsara. So pause and contemplate in that way and try to gain clarity and conviction on that point. Lama Zopa writes, the three objects of friend, enemy, and stranger are false and have been labeled incorrectly for extremely temporary reasons. The current friend, enemy, and stranger have not always been friend, enemy, and stranger in my countless previous lives. Even the enemy of last year can become my friend this year, and yesterday's friend become my enemy today. It can all change within an hour. He writes, a text says, if you try for a moment to befriend an enemy, he will become your friend. The opposite occurs if you treat a friend as an enemy. Therefore, the wise, understanding the impermanent nature of temporary relationships, are never attached to them, nor to food, clothing, or reputation. He writes, the Buddha said, in another life the father becomes the son, the mother the wife, the enemy a friend. It always changes. In cyclic existence nothing is certain. Therefore there is no reason to be attached to friends or to hate enemies. He writes, if the ignorant concept of true existence were true, the three designations of friend, enemy, and stranger should have existed from countless previous lives and should continue to exist through the present to beyond enlightenment. This makes complete nonsense of the concept of enlightenment, since the Buddha's sublime enlightened mind is completely free of the delusions and imprints that create such distinctions. So here again we'll pause and reflect on these logical reasonings. Seeing how superficial how temporary, how transitory these designations are, seeing them as ultimately essenceless. Completely fabricated by the deluded mind. Here trying to gain conviction and clarity on discarding such a system of discrimination, doing away with it entirely. So pause and contemplate, trying to give rise to that clarity, that conviction. And then when you're ready, we'll come back together. There is actually more to this particular. It's quite long. I didn't really think it through. So we'll pick it up next week. We'll do the remaining section. But we probably should we'll go on just, did you have, go ahead.
Thank you, Venerable. I have I guess a comment and a question. The thought went through my mind while we were meditating that we're told one of the great downfalls is to create a schism in the sangha or with a teacher, etc. And it seems to me that by being self-absorbed or concentrating only on yourself, that you're creating a schism in that action. And it seems like a greater downfall, even a greater downfall, or at least as negative a downfall, to create that schism with sentient beings. My question is, by removing the label of friend, stranger, and enemy, do you gain equanimity? Is that...
So, in terms of the specific labeling of that, in terms of the five, heinous actions or the five uninterrupted negative karmas, and that, creating a schism in the Sangha means to enter into a functioning Buddhist community, particularly a community of fully ordained monks and nuns who are all intentionally striving for enlightenment, and then to render that community inoperable by spreading, either lies or suspicions or even just intentionally, kind of creating doubt. You could try to question, or and not in a good faith way of like, oh, I don't understand this, I need more, but like, trying to denigrate people's practice, and in that sort of way. And so because they are, almost no sentient beings are trying to do that, and so that's why it's different. You're taking people away from their practice. You are, and it was a well-functioning, well-established, harmonious community of people who were aiming for that, and then you completely destroy that process for those people, potentially delaying their enlightenment for eons, which would not otherwise have happened had you not, engaged in that intention. And it has to be intentional. If you're like, if you're just sort of a ill-tempered person and people get fed up with you, and then they're like, oh, well, this Buddhism thing is for the birds, then that's not, it wasn't intentional. They just sort of, they gave in to sort of their own negativities, because you just happen to be not you, but like just if you're part of a sangha, and you're creating, if it's not intentional, then it's different. Just because sometimes people can be people can be mentally ill, or whatever, and they can create, they can join a sangha and they can create some obstacles, but it has to really be kind of your goal to sort of rend that. So it's, in a way, it's true that that's uncommon, that that's not something which is, it's one of the 5 uninterrupted negative karmas, so it's not something that people are often doing. Whereas, as you're saying, due to self-grasping and self-cherishing, that's the default state of all ordinary sentient beings, and it is responsible for a sense of separation, a sense of, which empowers all of, empowers hatred, empowers, so it's more pernicious, I would say, because actually giving rise to the wish to rend a community apart is very unusual. Whereas the default state of self-grasping and self-cherishing is very deeply rooted, is very pernicious, and is driving the engine of our unenlightened, perpetuating our unenlightened state. Giving rise to lifetime after lifetime of maybe not lower realm rebirths, but at least ordinary rebirths, many of which are lower. So they're both really, we have to, the teaching on the 5 uninterrupted negative karmas is really just like, because they are special cases in a way, we're not going around killing our parents, we're not drawing the blood, it's just like, don't do those things. Those are, they're reasonably easy to avoid. But if you do create them, the karma ripens in the very next lifetime, whereas other kinds of karma will ripen, but it will ripen in the future, giving you more time to purify it. So, I mean, the real purpose of the teaching on the 5 uninterrupted negative karmas, 1, is really just don't do them, and 2, we've done them in the past, so purify the remnants of having done them in the past is still important to do. We still need to think about ways in which we've done those in previous lives. But certainly, as you're saying, because self-grasping and self-cherishing empower, they in turn are empowered by fundamental ignorance, but that kind of introductory chain is responsible for jealousy and covetousness and maliciousness and ill will and everything else. It drives every suffering. It drives, and so in that way, and it's so much more deeply ingrained in us, that it's nowhere near as easy to avoid as, hey, just don't kill your mom, don't kill your dad, don't try to draw the blood from a Buddha. Those are pretty easy things comparatively. So it's just that but still, the karma ripens in different ways. Because of the power of a spiritual community, the power of that karmic object, and the power of the karmic object of one's biological parents, but because of the power of those karmic objects, it's still true that the karma ripens in a different way, meaning that it ripens immediately. But that's all that it means. It's not saying that it isn't, that it's more overall more pernicious or overall more responsible for our suffering. All that it means is that karma ripens in a way where it's more difficult to purify, you don't have as much time, and so on.
Thank you.
So we'll end with the swift return prayers. Which you would think I would have ready to go, but I don't. Okay. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Prajeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean, of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And then the one written by Kondrila. Guru, think of me. Guru, consider me. Gracious Guru, care for me. And kind, do not deprive our compassionate refuge. Listen and consider this heartfelt prayer made by a tormented disciple. Guru, you embody the blessings of the Buddhas of the three times. You may rest in great bliss, equipoise within the dhatu of unimpeded luminosity, yet the playful dance of your loving compassion can emanate in myriad ways. The swift appearance of your magical wisdom, the Rupakaya. The time has come for you to care for us once again with your affectionate compassion. I invoke you, I call upon you, I implore you on behalf of all beings. Arise, arise, arise from the Dharmakaya. Do not rest in Kachara or other pure celestial realms. Rather, to benefit the Buddhist teachings and all living beings, swiftly return to this southern continent to spread the Buddha Dharma of study and realization. Quickly return to guide us poor, wretched beings. Such is the desperate cry of us, your disciples. Return so that we may actually behold your presence and receive the blessings of your enlightened body, speech, and mind. All violations, errors, mistakes, and broken samaya that we have made in relation to your spontaneously present, awakened body, speech, mind, and activity, through our being baffled, confused, and conceiving things in erroneous ways, we confess within the luminous emptiness of your three kayas. Of everything auspicious, the supreme auspiciousness, may there be the auspiciousness of emptiness and compassion conjoined, and the auspiciousness of a timely meeting between master and disciples. Through the force of the truth of unchanging suchness, may the unmistaken incarnation return quickly. This lament was made by me, a Dakini with pure faith and samaya, with eyes filled with tears of sorrow. May these wishes of a beggar woman be fulfilled through the blessings of the deities of the three roots. Perception, its object, and the act of perceiving all dissolve within the expanse, the blissful clarity of suchness. Ah. So I'll pause here in the spirit of dedication and again offer the merit of this practice and these prayers to the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, clearly visualizing that ripening result flowing from our karma. All right. So we will meet again on Monday.
Thanks very much, Venerable.